The title of this session is Making Admins Happy, a guide to using sites in higher education. Your presenter, I'll just quickly introduce him. His name is Robert Whitt. He is the Device Management Systems Engineer with Leverage Services and the Leverage Services Group at Indiana University. So he'll be up in just a second. As a quick reminder, any questions that you might have, I'll be monitoring Twitter for that hashtag right there, which is JNUC 2016 sites. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put those on Twitter. Without further ado, here's Robert.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone being here. First of all, we were up against a couple really good sessions, so if you're only here because you came late, that's okay. We accept you, that's fine. So yeah, my name is Robert Whitt, and I'm a Device Management Systems Engineer with Indiana University. I work for Leverage Services, and part of what we do with Leverage Services is we create solutions around the university for organizations to help better manage their devices. So whether these are Apple devices or Windows devices or printers, we're helping provide platforms to manage these. Now back in 2014 I presented. I had not been at this job for very long, and it was called Don't Panic, and it's about recovering when you find yourself in a situation where you've inherited an environment and there's been a significant staff turnover. So that's still up on YouTube. Feel free to look that up. At the time, we had 9 sites and around 900 devices. Today, we're in production, and we're up to 31 sites, around 4,100 devices. 3,400 of those are OS X devices. The rest are iOS devices currently. So, a little bit about our environment. I'm not going to go into high amounts of detail about this. This is just so you kind of understand our workflow a little better. We have a test and a production environment that are clustered. They're mirrored, which means that for every server I have in production, I have a server in test that is configured exactly the same. This is because we do test validation in that environment before we move into production. We also use JDS distribution points, for better or for worse. Mostly for better. I like JDS for the most part. So today we are going to be talking about the challenge of sites in higher education. We're going to take a look at how we kind of have implemented a few things to help address the challenges that we have. We're going to talk about elevating site admin access. There's a couple different ways. Many of you have done this. And we're going to talk about auditing our admins. Just out of curiosity, how many people currently use sites? How many people think that sites work great and there's no problems? Not even the Jamf guy is raising his hand? Okay. All right. So the challenge in higher education, and this is kind of a blatant statement, this is not necessarily true of all higher education institutions, but in our environment, we have a very decentralized IT infrastructure. So that means that we don't have a top-level IT group that dictates how things are going to be managed and what you're going to use. We have these top-level policies that they love to create. So this is like sometimes very specific policies, like you're going to encrypt all your laptops. And sometimes they're not so specific. They say you're going to hire competent IT people to manage those laptops. But at the end of the day, it's up to the departments to determine how they comply. So some of these may decide, okay, well, let's pay for a product like Casper. That's okay. Someone will say, hey, no, there's like Deploy Studio, Monkey, we're going to come up with our own thing. That's fine too. The issue is that they're all trying to accomplish the same thing. They all set up their own stuff, and we end up with duplication of services all across the university. Oh, there's the third group, right? The ones that don't do anything. They're the ones who hand the devices out, and then they go away until they need an upgrade. So there's that group too, and that's okay. But we saw definitely the problem, and that there was a need for a centralized solution that we could help to to alleviate the issues that the admins were having. Because some of these groups, they're limited resources, limited staff, and of the staff that they have, you have a wide range of knowledge that you're going to get from these IT admins at the departmental level. It might be really experienced, or it might be an extraordinarily green person who's just coming in and knows very little. So it can be fairly intimidating to have to also, on top of everything else you're doing on a day-to-day basis, managing the infrastructure needed to manage your devices. So when we started looking at using Casper, Jamf Pro, as the foundation for our solution, it became very clear that there were some issues. And obviously the first one being with site admins permissions. How many people love site admins permissions? How do they have them set up currently? I mean, as a global admin, everyone has access to everything. We're going to concentrate today on this particular line, specifically because packages, scripts, and printers, those are the three things we're going to look at. On a day-to-day basis, these are the things that generate the most tickets and that affect our admins' lives consistently. Of course, site admins really don't get much access at all. So they can create policies and configuration profiles, but they have no access to manage their packages, scripts, and printers, surprisingly enough. This is 996. So normally the one thing that had been working, which was VPP and DEP tokens, they were able to be managed at the site level. Those no longer are manageable at the site. This is a bug, by the way, but just FYI, 996, your site admins will not see DEP or VPP tokens by default. So we know site admins permissions are an issue. We knew that we wanted to concentrate on packages, scripts, and printers. But the problem is these all live in a shared space. So if I'm a site admin, I can go and create a policy, and I can look at the software that's available, or look at the printers that are available, or look at the scripts, and I can choose anything I want. There's no way for us to restrict access on a site level to these items in the web interface. And we all know that everyone in departments likes to share with each other. They don't want to be their own silo, do they? They don't have fiefdoms all over the university that are battling for resources. So this brings us back to the original question. Knowing what we know, how can we make our admins happy? You can't. Thank you. Thanks for coming. It's been great. Appreciate it. Okay, so we can't make our admins happy. That's actually true. I don't know very many IT admins who are happy. Jovial maybe, but not necessarily happy. So to make them, to kind of make things work, we need to set some ground rules for our site admins. So the first rule we need to really work on is we're going to create, if this works here, naming conventions, which shouldn't be surprising and shouldn't be a problem for most of our users because we already have Active Directory. We're already using a naming convention. Most of them should be used for this. So we're going to tap into that. We're going to say, okay, your top level Active Directory organizational unit that you use is going to be your site name. So for us, for example, we're IU-LServ. That becomes our site name. That also becomes the prefix for everything in those shared sites. Doing this provides a mechanism for our admins to quickly and easily, when they go and create a policy, to identify what is and is not theirs. We're also going to require that we have the test environment for validation. So we're going to require when you onboard with us, you're going in the test environment first. And then what we also do is we say, 30 days. Try it out for 30 days. And that's kind of an arbitrary number. It could be whatever you want, but we just wanted to identify a time frame where, okay, you haven't been doing anything for a while. We're going to go ahead and remove you. When you're really ready, come back to us and we'll get you set back up and test. And we also, once they kind of play around a bit, we offer a week-long training session. So we'll go out on site and kind of do a mini jump start where we'll help configure policies, configuration profiles, and kind of run through all of the do's and don'ts. And then once they're ready, we then migrate them. We do a one-time migration from our test environment into our production environment. And we just use the API for that. But we wanted to add some additional things. We wanted to, we're thinking about these groups who have limited time and resources. What can we do, and also the ones who aren't doing anything, right? What can we do to provide incentive and provide value to this service that gets people to want to be a part of this? Because, one of the challenges was that, we don't know how many Macs are out there. We know there's a lot. We asked Apple to run some numbers, and over the last 5 years, we've got between 15 to 20,000 Macs that are not personal and are not iOS devices that have been purchased by the university. And we've got about 3,400 under management right now. That's not to say that the other departments aren't managing them, but these are the ones we know about. So we thought, we're already managing labs. We manage a generalized lab build for the university, and we do a lot of software packaging. So this is like university license things like Creative Cloud, Office, and then all the other common things, Firefox, Java, things like that. So we're already doing a lot of software packaging, so can we provide a global software catalog? And again, just using the naming convention, we just provide global is now the prefix. So now our site admins know they can use their prefix, global, anything else they shouldn't use. We also want to take this a step further and say, you know, we want to provide a way for them to subscribe to a service where, let's say they don't want to manage their software packages at all. They just want to use our software catalog and provide it as self-service items to their users. So for most of the global catalog items, we create corresponding self-service items or self-service policies, and then we provide two ways for them to enroll into this, either on a case-by-case basis using an extension attribute. They can choose true for global catalog, and when they do, they're scoped into our policies. Or using their naming convention, they can create either a smart or static group and name it with their prefix, access to global catalog, and we can scope that into our policies. So that when their users then open up self-service, they have access to everything that we package. So we were thinking, you know, okay, we've done this with software. We got software, and that's pretty good, but there's a lot of things we do with scripts as well that are common things that are scripts. So can we provide global scripts so that we have one script that all sites can use for common items? And I'm not talking complicated scripts here. These are very basic things. But one we'll take a look at is the global map IP printer, because printers are a pain point because, again, inherently they don't have access to manage them. But this way, we can take advantage of the parameters and they can name their printer here. And since this doesn't live in the shared area, they don't have to put their prefix on it. They can name it whatever they want. Location, printer IP can be either an IP address or it can be a print server with a print queue, PPD, and whether or not that's default. And this script is very basic. This is not complicated stuff. I'm talking very basic things we can do to make our admins' lives easier. So just using some strategically placed variables, so we can use parameters. This is just the lp-admin command that we're using, and then a check on whether or not they chose if it wanted to be default or not. So, not really doing much of anything, we've provided a way for our admins, without elevating access at all, we provided a way for our admins, once they have devices enrolled, to use software, basic scripts. And in all honesty, a lot of our sites, this is all they do. They don't need additional software. They don't have special needs software, special needs scripts. Now, we also provide a mechanism if they have software that they don't feel comfortable packaging. They can request software from us. We'll package it and add it into the distribution point, either as a site-level item or a global item, depending on the situation. But this has been pretty useful. This is how a lot of our admins work. But there's times where we have other groups who do need elevated access. And these are admins, for us it's the campus admins group, and these are admins who are fairly high level. They have a responsibility that's at either a campus level for devices, or they serve multiple departments across a campus as well. So these are trusted individuals, and that's not to say I don't trust all of our site admins. I trust everyone, but these are individuals we have a very close working relationship with, and so we're just more comfortable providing this access. Plus, in the departmental areas, you can have a lot of high turnover, so it's very difficult to sometimes establish that long-term trust. We do require a separate Active Directory account for accessing any elevated items. So the idea is on a day-to-day basis, you're going to work as a site admin. This is what I do as well. Day-to-day basis, I work as a site admin. And then I log into a separate account that has elevated access only when I need to use it. This is good practice. You could also obviously elevate certain items for your entire group if you wanted to. And the way we're doing this, obviously, is just setting up a secondary group. Instead of site-level access, we choose full access with a custom privilege set. And through the power of copy and paste, I have removed all the extra items here on the right and only shown the things we provide elevated access. The highlighted items are just the more common things that this particular group works with, but there's a few extra things there that we provide. The second thing is we only provide this access in our test environment. We don't provide any elevated access in production. So our site admins who have this level of access go to test, upload software, create their scripts, whatever they're doing. We then move that into production for them. And this is just, again, part of validation, partly of we don't want there to be any accidents in production with elevated access. That was also, that also has full CRUD permissions as well. So you could do some more customizations here and say, we're going to elevate you, but we're not going to give you delete or something like that. We provide all of this access in guidelines, and then they just work in test, which makes us a little more comfortable with providing this. You can also use, oh, I just flew by that one. You can also use you can give access to the tools like Casper Admin. I think Casper Admin's going away from what I understand. However, currently, if you still use Casper Admin, you can provide this access to your site admins, but if you have a lot of them, just be aware that Casper Admin doesn't like multiple users working in it at the same time. Because when you log in, if you have 3 admins who've logged in at the same time, one's uploading a package, one's doing a script, and one's doing a printer, and they all save at different points, someone loses in that battle, so. And if you do elevated access with your users groups, do anyone here provide elevated access to their site admins without doing a separate account? Yes? Okay, so in those cases you have, and there's nothing wrong with that, in those cases your users can change to the full JSS and then they can see the extra items. The only issue is if they forget and they leave this as full JSS and then they move to use something like Recon or Remote, those rely on the site selection for authentication. So if someone then tries to log into one of those tools, they're going to get this connection error, which is not particularly specific about what's happening. But if you see this, most likely it's a, hey, can you go log into the JSS Jamf server and see if you have full JSS selected and choose your site. And then if they close out of the app all of the way and then log back in after that, they should be all right. So we started thinking, all right, this workflow works fairly well for us. And for the most part, we have a fairly high level of satisfaction from our admins. They're going into tests, they do their things, we move them into production, and this works pretty well. But we were always thinking about things we can do. We want to move forward. We want to provide more access to make them more self-sufficient so that we can get out of the way, which also, in turn, frees up our cycles to go move on to something else. So this is where Firehouse comes in. This is a custom tool we wrote, which is, so I was watching a session yesterday about open culture from Shopify, which was a great session. And they also had a custom tool they created that was based off of Ghostbusters, so I feel a lot less creative right now. But anyway, it was great though. This was actually a combination of 3 different tools we had. We had one that was called Print Ghost for managing printers, one called Egon for managing scripts, and then one called the Casper Containment Unit for managing software packages. So these are all combined now into Firehouse, which again allows us to manage our software scripts and printers. We do not have to elevate our user privileges at all. So a regular site admin can use this tool without any elevation. The admins only see the objects assigned to their site. And this enforces our naming convention. Because one of the problems we had with just elevating access was that we are now trusting that our admins are going to adhere to our naming convention when they're naming objects, and they do, but sometimes you're going to get misspellings, they're using uppercase, lowercase, sometimes they forget to name the package correctly until after they upload it and they change the display name, which doesn't change the name on the distribution point. And, oh, there we go. So this just helps us to be consistent with how that's being displayed. And what this looks like is our developer has implemented themes. So here's our Halloween theme for Firehouse. So we can either choose test or production, and when we log in, there's a few things happening here. This is scripts, and we have on the left, that's not a text editor, but you can, if you're working on a script in like Text Wrangler or whatever your tool of choice is, you can copy and paste your script into that area, choose your category, enter your display name, and I don't know if you can see it, but at the bottom it says the script's going to be posted with our site prefix. So it's going to automatically add that onto the front of the script. And then at the very top, it's hard to see because it's grayed out there, but there's a drop-down that allows you, if you have a site admin who has access to multiple sites, they can choose that from the drop-down, and then they're only going to see packages from that particular site. Packages, very similar. So we're seeing all the packages that are available for this particular site. We can go up and delete whichever one we want. And if we choose add, this is very familiar. This is what we could usually do within either the web interface or Casper admin. And this allows them to select the package they're uploading. The only part about this is this doesn't automatically name it. If you choose a package that isn't properly named with your naming convention, it's going to throw out an error. But this allows them to edit or configure all the options that they need for that particular software package. And then, of course, printers. They can either manually configure the printer if they want, or there's an import local printer up on the upper right. They can choose, so similar to Casper admin, if you have one configured locally, you can go and you can choose that and import to the settings. In all honesty, for the most part, we and most of our sites are using the scripting method anymore. It's very easy, so we're doing that quite a bit now. But if you want to, this is an option. So the way this works, we are using a dedicated privileged API account on the back end. So that's kind of how we get around it. When we do authentication for the user, so when they log in, we're authenticating to Active Directory, and then we're looking up what site groups they belong to. Because again, since we're using Active Directory as kind of the foundation for our prefixes, we can find the prefix from the groups they're in, and then we can match that to the available sites that's within the Jamf server. And this is kind of a very basic diagram of the workflow. We authenticate in, we check the credentials and look for the group. The API will pull down the XML, and then it will do the matching and only display out the items for the user with that site name. So this has really changed the workflow for us pretty significantly. We tested it in our test environment for quite a while. We've just moved it into production, so now our sites and our site admins can be much more productive on their own. We're no longer a hurdle, at least for those three particular items. And that's not to say everything's perfect. Obviously, we still have issues that we have to work out, and there's still more things that we'd like to do. But this has been a fairly great tool that we've been using. So the one thing we can't do, so we're enforcing our naming convention, which is great, but what's the problem still? The problem is they can still go into a policy and choose whatever they want. I still can't restrict that. So it doesn't matter how many naming conventions I come up with. And that's not to say people do this a lot, but frequently what happens when we're working with a department, we bring on a department, there's a site admin we work with, and then they bring additional admins into their admin group because they manage that. And they may or may not know the rules, even though the site admin's responsibilities is to inform them of that. We have a lot of documentation. But, sometimes that doesn't happen. So we have to still audit our users. We have to be able to ensure that they're following the rules, because otherwise we lose a lot of trust with our admins, because we're telling them, hey, we audit this stuff. We ensure people aren't going to use software packages they're not supposed to use. And the way we do this is with Walter. So going back to Ghostbusters, this is Walter Peck, the EPA guy. So Walter is a tool. He is a tool that just for oversight. And what he does is he goes out and he pulls everything down from the JSS. So this is a computationally heavy operation if you have a very large environment. So definitely not something that we run during prime time. But it pulls everything down, and then what it does is it goes through all the policies, and it looks for items that have prefixes in it, and it sees if it matches the site prefix or the site name. If it doesn't, it spits it out. So here, for example, we've got our Mac Lab build for this year. That's our prefix for that site. And there's a few things in here. Global, we can say, hey, global, that's okay. Global items anyone can use. A few of the other items are older lab build items, so those are okay. But there's a music one down here that's being used, and that ends up being because the music department manages that, they asked for that to be added into the lab build. So that's okay as well, because I prefer not to package if I don't have to, so that's great. So that helps us out a lot with that particular problem. We can run that frequently and just then send reports out to our users so that, hey, you're using this software package, you shouldn't be using it. And that's not to say you're being bad. We're not here to say, you're being bad, you shouldn't do that. This is more to open up a dialogue to say, why are you using that software package? Maybe it should be a global package. Maybe we should manage it. Or maybe you can partner up with that department on that particular piece of software. So it's really about just maintaining oversight and just making sure that everyone's communicating and everyone is on the same page. So the other way we can monitor our admins are with change management. How many people use change management logs? How many people use the audit logs? The audit log we had to enable. That wasn't for whatever reason when we upgraded at some point when they added that feature. Can't remember what version it was. But we had to add that. And that just that actually gives you some additional information on where your users are logging in from. But how many people offload their logs to an external logging server? Congratulations, you win. So you can actually look at the auditing logs within Casper, but I highly recommend choosing something like Graylog to offload these onto, because it just makes for a better way to organize and display this information, and also you can do some really cool things with it. So for example, this is a dashboard we created in Graylog, and this is very basic stuff. You can get more creative than this, but we've got some service usage, so we can see that where our users are logging in from. This is from the audit log, so there is the JSS, the API, the Casper Suite applications, so whether or not recon, remote, whatever those are, and enrollment, I need to rename that, and then self-service. So you get an idea of how your users are using the items within the service. You can also see how many failed login attempts are happening. In this case, everything within the last 24 hours is what this dashboard's set up for. But you can quickly identify that, hey, we've got a lot of failed logins from this particular user. Maybe there's an issue we need to follow up on. And you also get where they're logging in from and how often they're logging in. So this just kind of scratches the surface, but it gives you an idea of a little bit of what you can do. You can also do searching. So in this case, we're searching for some deleted items. Let's say you're only doing elevated access, your users can delete items, and a site admin says, hey, where'd my software go? I have a package that just disappeared. You can go and you can look for it here fairly quickly. You get some basic information in the header, and then you can click on that and get additional information about how the package, in this case the software package, was configured at the time it was deleted, who deleted it, when it was deleted. And you can also do some really neat things with notifications here. So you can start identifying criteria here to set off notifications. So for example, in our lab environment, we were having some build issues, so I wanted to know every single time someone initiated a lab build. And to do that, there were a few things we identified, and we were able to set up a notification to email us to say, hey, there's a potential rebuild. It wasn't always catching it. Sometimes it was a false positive, but most of the time we knew that, okay, it's very likely someone initiated a build. It would tell us where it was from, what machine it was, and we could follow up with that. So definitely think about ways you could leverage this for your own notifications, because it's very useful. Now we had another group at IU who was running a Splunk service. And so we were like, well, let's try this out, because Graylog's free, but Splunk was being offered, it is a paid product, but it was top level funded, so for us there wasn't going to be no cost. And if someone else is running the back end, once again, duplication of services, why not? And here we can do some similar things as far as what we want to display. Again, this is very basic stuff, but we're seeing like all failed logins, from where, actions that have been taken, And again, you can also do a lot of searching. So in this case, we're looking for deleted objects within the last 24 hours. And we can see who deleted it. We can see what the name of the item was as well as what type. So in this case, we see some items from patch reporting were deleted, a couple computers were deleted, and the items that are grayed out are like computer names and usernames. So, but this is extraordinarily useful for just monitoring what is happening within your environment. So it just makes it a lot easier to kind of handle. So with that, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, if you have any questions, make sure you're tweeting those out, JNUC 2016 sites. I had 2 of them come in already. The first one, do you have test JDS instances, or how do you deal with distribution points in your test environment?
We do. We actually have, for every server we have in our production environment, we have a corresponding server in test. So that means we have an internal JSS, we have the external JSS, we have we have actually 4 JDS servers in production. Actually, we have more than that, but 4 primary ones that run on Red Hat Linux. Most of ours are Red Hat, and those are then also in test. So those are all, again, we're trying to recreate for validation purposes. We want to recreate our production environment as closely as possible. So yes.
And then, do your site admins have global read-only or auditor access?
No.
Perfect. Nope. Any other questions? We'll give him just a minute here. Come on in.
All right. Oh, we got one.
It's not showing up yet, but what's your question? I'll repeat it.
How many departments versus colleges versus sites do you have? Departments or colleges versus sites?
Let me just repeat that real quick. How many departments or colleges do you have, and what does that look like?
I don't.
Versus sites.
Versus sites. So how many total potential sites might we have at one point in time? So we're at 31 right now, sites in our environment. I don't know the total number. I mean, we're talking about a fairly large university across 7 campuses. So I mean, there's the amount of departments are large. So I don't know that number offhand. I can certainly find that out for you if you want. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot out there. And like I said, there's a lot of devices too that we're not sure of where they're being managed. Are they being managed? How they're being managed? And we're trying to make more incentive to get people to be interested in this product. So.
How many internal and external GSS instances are you running?
So in production, oh, sorry, you want to repeat that?
Yeah. So how many internal or external JSS instances are you running?
Yep. So in production, we are just doing this simply to provide external access to our devices. So we have an internal JSS that our admins can log into for management, and there's an external that is set up just for device communication, and then that's also in test. So we also have an internal, so 4 total is what we have, but they're 2 different environments. So.
I got another question here. Would you allow Firehouse to another education entity, or would you be open to sharing that?
We're definitely open to that. I think if you're interested in that, please get with me, because I think there's definitely some cases where maybe we can do some collaboration. Maybe we can start talking about how everyone's using sites, and maybe we can start to improve everyone's experiences. Because again, we're all facing similar things with dealing with sites and site admins in higher ed, and not just higher ed. I mean, this goes out to other institutions as well. But so if you're interested in that and you want to see Firehouse become something larger, feel free to get with me. I'm happy to, I'll get the developer in. We'll kind of chat about things and see what we can do to make that more open. So.
And does the same go for Walter?
I think Walter might be even easier to do. I mean, because that's not, there's not as many variables that happen within the backend on that. So I have a feeling that we could probably make that happen, or at least help with making a version that works for you. So the problem with Firehouse is just that right now there's a lot of customizations for our environment with our Active Directory implementation. So it would just be getting over a couple hurdles there. But definitely, yeah, feel free to let me know. Happy to talk about it and happy to work with you. So.
Got one more here. How do you give an admin access to more than one site?
Essentially, it's very similar. So you can have as many Active Directory groups that you want. So in our case, you could have, if you've got like for example, the IU Lab Build site, and you have an Active Directory admin group for that, and you add that into Jamf as a site level with admin access, and then you have another group that's for a different site that is site level admin, and that one user is just a member of both of those groups. And then what will happen is when they log in, you have a drop down at the top and they can choose what site they want to manage. So.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Why don't you give him a round of applause? He'll be around if you need anything.
Thank you, everyone.